Hello and good evening, everyone. Probably gonna have a slightly smaller audience for this one, just because it's a change from the last couple of shows that we've done. But this one might actually be better as a VOD because there'll be some information in this that will hopefully be useful to either new people who want to get into YouTube or people who've been doing it for a while and maybe want to learn a couple of new tips and tricks and stuff like that. So, what are we doing tonight? Well, for the past couple of streams, I have been going through stuff that has been submitted to uh, to here. So, people have been submitting their thumbnails and asking, how can I improve this? What's some tips and tricks for, getting more eyes on my stuff and making sure that it's reaching a wider audience. And as somebody who's got a lot of experience making, promotional artwork and thumbnail stuff for a lot of big YouTubers, people like Jacob Geller and Rasputin and Eurofug4K, as well as many others, I kind of gave my sort of past experience and expertise on that particular subject. But for a lot of people, they're not even quite sure where to start making anything. Like, so well and good reviewing stuff that people have already made, but sometimes you're not really sure how to make something or where to start. So that is the point of tonight. We will be making thumbnails from scratch, or I guess I'll be making thumbnails from scratch. If you guys have the opportunity to perhaps go through it yourself at home, like if you have a copy of Photoshop and you can kind of go along at my pace, then that's great. If you want to, put your hand up or ask anything in the chat about anything that I'm doing, that's absolutely fine as well. I'm more than happy to either give more clarification about the stuff that I'm talking about or, kind of break down more what I'm doing. But in regards to how we're doing that, I haven't written a script for this. Funnily enough, I did watch Rasputin's stream earlier in the week where he was talking about how to get into YouTube and how to make YouTube video essays. And while this isn't quite an extension of that, it is sort of in the same vein of how do I do something for YouTube, but it's how do I make thumbnails. So essentially where all these kind of things start with is with the video, or at least with the idea for the video. And whether that is making it for yourself or making it for somebody else who has come to you, essentially, you have to start from a few components, which is what's the video about? Like, what's the title? What's the subject matter? Who is going to be the audience on this? Who do you want to what kind of demographics do you want to reach? And also you need to consider, hello Evan, welcome to the chat. Just to give a...
Yeah, baby!
Oh, thank you very much for the follow as well. Just as a heads up, what we are doing tonight is going through how to make thumbnails. And essentially, I'm just covering the beginning parts of that, which is essentially starting with concept. And the concept starts with, obviously, what's the video and, what's the title and stuff like that. LA Bravier, also, welcome to the chat. Hi. So when you're making a thumbnail, you have to kind of consider, well, what video is it going to go for? What's your target audience? What's like the big thesis of the video, or like what's the thing that you want to get into? And so, like, to give like examples of stuff that I've recently worked on, one video was about explaining how the mode in the Link's Awakening remake, it had a mode for making your own dungeons, and I wanted to explain how like that was a really cool thing, and it was a big part of like what made that experience really cool, but also like why this is a cool little toy to play with. And the thumbnail that I came up with, which I will quickly bring up now before I change over to the different screen, wherever it may be. Let's move over. There we go. And so the idea with this was, it's kind of self-explanatory. It is Link and Dompe building a little dungeon, but with the extra elements of they're on a little craft table. I've added like a little bits of paper and glue and stuff like that, a little Octorok, and you know, it's always the idea. Like, you look at that and you'd look at the title of the video, you'd look at that, and you kind of get the idea of what we're talking about, which is, oh, he is making a video about why the dungeon builder, or why building your own Zelda is a good thing, or, like, you know, how to do that sort of stuff. Another video that I recently made, actually the last video I made, was a April Fool's video, which was about, on March 31st, they took a couple of Mario titles off the eShop, including Mario 3D All-Stars, and there was a joke going around that obviously was like, you know, Nintendo were going to put Mario down. And so on April 1st, I made a video which was a kind of a eulogy to Super Mario, as if he had died. And so the thumbnail that I made for that was this, which, you know, that's a completely different style of stuff. It's about, you know, a very kind of nice, provocative image of Mario, you know, sepia tone, grayscale, and, you know, very simple text to kind of sell the point. Yeah, R.I.P. Mario. Also, welcome to the chat, Kiki Christ. So these are the kind of things that you have to consider, like, when you start making thumbnails, which is just, you know, what's the tone I want to go for, what's the style I want to go for. In regards to, say, styling it to kind of, like, have a consistency across your channel, we're probably not going to do too much of that yet, but that is obviously something to consider in anything that you make. Like, the thing that kind of unifies a lot of my thumbnails together is this little GamesD icon in the corner, and also kind of my use of fonts and stuff like that. I'm a very big fan of using a nice square font like this. In fact, this one is, the font in both of these, I believe, is Montserrat, which you can get on Google Fonts, and it's a very useful and very versatile font to have. But sometimes there may be a video which can't quite fit in that, or there may be the point where, because, say, somebody knows that you have the capacity to do so, or they want to help you out, they'll go to you and they'll say, hey, I'm working on a video and I would like you to make the thumbnail for it. And in those cases you say, okay, well, one, what's the video called, what's it about, you know, what kind of tone are you going for. Usually when you talk to people, they'll have a couple of video examples to send to you to kind of give an example of, hey, here's the kind of tone I'm going for, and then I sort of starting channel stuff. We actually had quite an interesting thing in the last thumbnail workshop where somebody had submitted thumbnails for a channel which had yet to exist. These were things that he was currently working on, and he was like, hey, can you review how I'm getting on and like what I'm aiming for? And he kind of gave a brief overview of what he wanted his channel to be, which is kind of this analytical view on kind of smart indie games. So, you know, we wanted to make sure that that was conveyed in the stuff that he was doing. So that's also something to consider, is like, you know, what kind of brand, what kind of tone do I want to approach with this sort of stuff? And those are all the starting pieces of how you should start to come up with the concepts. So let's pull up an example. Let's say either you or somebody has come to you with a video idea, and this is the one that they give you. Because I have made a couple of fake YouTubers who need some thumbnails made. And the first one that we are going to be helping out is a channel called The Game Mechanics. Now, what they do is they make videos in the style of, say, Game Maker's Toolkit, or like a Vox style video, which goes into detail of game design and mechanics in games and why they are good. But this particular video that they're making is called Why Water Levels Suck? Which, again, that's a fun title because, you know, something that Jacob Geller mentioned with a lot of kind of video ideas is that you sort of want the hook with them, like you kind of want the question element to them of like, you don't immediately know the answer yourself. Like, if you can answer it yourself before you kind of click on the video, then you're not going to bother. But if there is a bit more of a hook to it, or if there is a bit more intrigue to it, then you might be a bit more pulled in. Because, yeah, nobody likes water levels, but there's a bit more to why that is. And yeah, so the thesis of the video is an exploration of water levels in games, evaluating what all the bad ones have in common and what the best ones do right. So, if I was given that prompt, I would immediately think, okay, so what I would probably ask is, what kind of games are you going to bring up? And what they'd probably say is, you know, platform games are stuff like Super Mario 64 or Banjo-Kazooie or, you know, these big 3D games that don't have very good swimming mechanics in it. And it's like, okay, well, I could potentially start from there. But then, you know, how do I convey that they're not very good and stuff like that? And so what I usually do from this point is, well, we're already in Photoshop, so let's start from here. And we'll make a brand new canvas. Now, if you are playing along at home, if you're doing this, obviously, I can't guarantee that everybody has Photoshop. I'm using CS6, which is a nearly 10-year-old version of Photoshop, so chances are if you have a version with a student account or you pay for it, then you're probably going to have a more up-to-date version than me. You could also use a piece of software called Photopea, which I will quickly grab the link to here, because it is a very cool piece of online... Oh, nope, that's not what I want. It's a very cool online editor, because it is very similar to Photoshop CS6. So a lot of things that I'll be doing in here you can kind of keep up with as well. If you're using GIMP or maybe another piece of software, hopefully some of this stuff should translate. It's going to be more about kind of layout design and, you know, picking and choosing how stuff looks. I'm not going to try and rely too much on tools that are exclusive to Photoshop, but obviously we'll see what happens. But so the starting point, the canvas, which this is a good thing to remember, which is if we change this to pixels, the maximum size of a YouTube thumbnail is 1280 by 720. They are all 720p in size. And I'm not sure what the reason is for this. I think it's purely based on when the website was built. The idea was that some thumbnails would be expanded to like whatever sub HD size was for television, because that was like, you know, that was the kind of the maximum bit rate of content that they'd be able to push to a television in kind of like 2008, 2009. They haven't updated it, and I don't think they really need to. Like, the more detail you put into a thumbnail, the less readable it's going to be. So actually working from this smaller size restricts, like, you know, it gives you a creative restriction to work to. So, and we start with a nice blank white canvas. The next step that I would usually take from here is say, well, they're talking about water levels in games. Now, a lot of creators may be kind enough to, if they have an idea in mind, say they know what games they're talking about, they may even give you screenshots or video that they have taken themselves and say, I really like this image, it's quite evocative, or I quite like this detail and stuff like that. So it'd be really cool if we could get that into the thumbnail. Failing that, you may have to go and either grab stuff yourself or look online, which is mostly how I gather a lot of content. So let's start with a biggie. Like, if you went on YouTube and you were like, okay, what's an image that's going to catch my eye? Like, what are the first kind of, like, what are the games that I like to recognize in a thumbnail? I think the number one is usually Nintendo stuff, which means probably Super Mario 64 will be a good place to start with there. And we'll call it, say, water level. And we'll start to have a look through some images. And yeah, see, so like we've already got, you know, a couple of nice evocative shots. We've got like that one of the guy who's inside the boat. There's that one as well. Water depth might even be a good one, actually, for grabbing. Oh yeah, so there's one of him drowning and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, Super Mario 64 drowning. See, it's always good to try and get one where he's facing the camera, because people like to see faces as much as they can, but... So yeah, no, there are a couple of YouTube videos that we could potentially use to like grab a screenshot from, but we could also potentially maybe go for a slightly newer Mario game. Oh, this is even quite a cool one. Like, somebody has made a kind of, yeah, like a piece of, oh yeah, that's like a piece of promo art or something that somebody's made for Super Mario 64. Let's start with this then as a basis for building the thumbnail around. And let's just quickly cut him out. This is just using the polygon tool to isolate him from the rest of this blue background image. Like so. Now if we say grab one of these blue colors using this eyedropper tool to set as a nice background matte like this, then, you know, we've kind of, we got something like this now. And say we could even now go to the effort of putting text on of, you know, what is the title of the video? It is why water levels suck. So we could maybe just type that out. Why water levels suck. And so, like, in less than a minute, we've managed to create a thumbnail like that. Not a very good one, but you can kind of see, like, the initial building blocks of how these kind of things come together. And, you know, it doesn't take a lot. It's just a nice evocative image and a nice solid piece of text. But we can go a little bit further than this. And one of the first things we can do is, rather than this initial font that it's chosen, we could maybe go for something a little bit more impactful. Maybe say, I don't know, not the Star Wars font. Maybe something like this. It may kind of fitting of the game mechanics, I suppose. And what we could even do is some key terms like water levels. We could put that in a slightly different color. Like maybe we could put it in a yellow or something to make that stand out. And it kind of looks a bit like Wii, so let's move this. Maybe we could even grab this red color from Mario's hat. Yeah, there we go. That's not a bad idea by there. But it's still a little bit, like, there's still a little bit more we could do with it. So one thing we can do is, well, let's have a look at this background image, because at the moment it's just solid blue. There's not really anything that interesting going on. So why don't we get a underwater texture? And as you can see, we got quite a cool few ones to work from. Now again, a lot of this stuff will be through Shutterstock or, you know, other, you know, channels that you need to buy this kind of stuff. But a lot of stuff on the internet is free to use. And of course, a lot of this stuff you can even try and make yourself. But if you're making thumbnails for other people, or if you have a particular deadline to hit, it is useful to use stuff like this to kind of kit bash it out. So yeah, so immediately, like, this is kind of a bit more evocative. Like, this is a bit more exciting. So if we maybe blur this a little bit, because you can kind of see a lot of, like, gritty looking pixels in the background. So if we go to blur, GoSign blur, which this should be in GIMP and stuff like that. A GoSign blur is a it's just a little bit of maths that kind of blurs every pixel in a particular direction by a particular amount, and because obviously it's under the ocean, we don't have to worry too much about it looking too sharp. And then say we could maybe change the blending mode. Oh yeah, this is cool. Change the blending mode on this so it kind of matches the color a little bit better. But we still have the issue with Mario that he stands out. So one thing that we can do is remove this blue around him. Easiest way to do this would be using, say, the Magic Wand tool or the Quick Selection tool, if you're using Photoshop, because you can literally just draw it around him, like so. And then if we quickly hit our mask button by here. We don't want to make our editing too destructive. What that basically means is when you hit the delete button, it's gone. The only way you can bring it back is by undoing, which you don't really want to do that too much in a workflow, because if you're constantly going backwards and forwards, it's not very fair on Photoshop. And eventually, if you go 20 steps down the line and realize that you made an issue at step 1, you may not be able to get back there. You might only be able to undo 10 times, 15 times. So having a non-destructive way of editing something is always the best way to go. And so what we use in this case is a mask. So if we click this little button down the bottom by here, which, yeah, no, hopefully you should be able to see that. This little button down the bottom by here, like so. Initially it looks like Mario is the person who's disappeared, but if we double click on him and say invert, he has now come back. Unfortunately there is still a little bit of an edge around him, but that is something that we can paint out. So if we grab a nice soft brush like so, make sure that it is in black, yep, and we'll just quickly go around and paint this stuff out. Oh, we don't even need to do that. We can make another thing like so. And then using the fill tool, we'll do exactly the same thing. And then click it a couple of times, and now that is completely gone. Mario has still got this blue edge around him, but again, we can fiddle around with the mask feathering and kind of reduce it. Or maybe we could even expand it, kind of give him almost the sort of like blue halo, which is, you know, a nice little touch like so. That's looking pretty cool. We have got this little area by here where his arm has been cut out, but at thumbnail size, you're not really going to notice it. Really impressive. No, it is surprising. I mean, back in the 2D days, you didn't need to worry about breathing at all. So, you know, but it's in the new games where that's really an issue. But we will get to that, actually. In fact, we'll actually make Mario a little bit bigger, just so he stands out a little bit more. And the nice thing about this as well is that he is angrily looking at the text, so it's almost like, I hate being in this water level, this is all your fault text, which again, that's a nice little visual gimmick. Now, I'm duplicating this because I want to put it on top of Mario. And by creating a little clipping mask, and then if we play around with the blending, it almost kind of puts him a little bit more within the scene, which is a nice thing. But we may want to play around with his levels a little bit. We want to make his brights a little bit brighter and his darks a little bit darker. And so, if you open up levels in Photoshop like this, you can pull this in and make his brights a little bit brighter and his darks a little bit darker, like so, which will make him a little bit easier to read at a smaller size. Now, there's a little bit more that we could do with this. We could add a bit more texture to it. One thing that we could do is, because in the original image that we pulled of Mario under the water, if we quickly delete this mask, he had like little bubbles and stuff around him. So what we could do is, if we bring back that original image that we found of Mario, and we isolate one of these bubbles using a round marquee, like so. We'll make a layer via copy, we'll delete that. And what we can do is put a couple of these in the scene and make them various different sizes and all that sort of stuff. It just gives it a little bit more visual richness than it would have before. And obviously, you know, bubbles, they vary in size, but they get smaller as they near the top of the water as they kind of dissipate. So, and what we can also do with these bubbles is that we can have them be on top of the text layer. So we have a nice little bit of, it kind of gives it a little bit more integration. It feels like everything is part of the same image. Another way that we can do that is by trying to match, so Mario's kind of got this shadow and shading to him, almost kind of make him look a bit more 3D, and we can apply that to the text itself. So if we create a clipping mask on top of this, because again, we don't want to be destructive, if we don't want to apply anything that we want to mess around with after the fact, we'll make another layer underneath it. And if we grab, say, this dark color by here, and if we remove all the saturation out of it, so we just have the gray value, and then create a little gradient like so. Hi, Chariot. Welcome to the chat. Welcome to these Photoshop lessons. You use GIMP, so hopefully this stuff would be able to translate to you. That being said, you have missed a bit of this, but this will be available as a VOD after the fact, because this will be slightly more educational than the other Thumbnail streams, which would be good. So yeah, now we got this kind of like little bit of grey on it, and that makes it a little bit more integrated. And another thing we can do is, because looking at Mario and he's kind of got this blue halo around him. Hey, thank you for the follow, Rick Bayer. Rick Bayer. Yeah, thank you very much. He's got this kind of little blue halo around him, and we can apply that to the text as well. So if we go into the effects options by here, and we go for outer glow. Initially it's gone with this white, but I think we kind of want more of this blue colour. Yeah, that seems about right. And then we can make this a little bit bigger, make it a little bit less. Oh, Rick Bear. Okay. No problem. I'm glad you were getting something out of this. Let's put this down to maybe 50% for now. And then we'll play around with the range as well. So what this does is it affects kind of, if you kind of imagine a gradient as kind of a mathematical thing, it's almost like, you know, 0 to 100 you're going to get like completely solid. But then if you kind of pull it back, it kind of, at the 100 area, it's at 0% opacity, and then it raises an opacity as it gets to this end. And range kind of works in the same way. So if we start with this, it's like all the way to the edge is going to be solid. But if we pull this forward instead, it kind of makes it a little bit tighter. So the only place where it's like completely opaque is near here. But to match Mario a little bit, we kind of want to put it more to, yeah, a little bit more around by here. We maybe want to push the opacity up a little bit more as well, like so. And so versus the initial thumbnail that we had, this has now got slightly more going on. This is a bit more exciting. You know, it's not just Mario against a solid blue background and a bit of text. It's now got a little bit more integration in it. But we can still push this a little bit further. Because again, the point of a YouTube thumbnail is that you will be seeing it at various different sizes. At its biggest, this will be how it looks on the front page, where, oh, the Game Mechanics has just put out a new video, and oh wow, it's about why water levels suck, and cool, I can see Mario and I can see the text. But more often than not, where people are watching your videos is through... Thank you very much, Li. How people watch a lot of videos is that they'll watch it. They'll be watching somebody else's video, and then they'll look at the sidebar for recommended or related content. And at sidebar size, you're kind of looking more at around this size by here. So fortunately for us, because we've used a nice big blocky bit of text, that's readable. Because we've used a nice big Mario, he's also readable. And because it's about water levels, we've made sure that the background is nice and blue. It's, you know, kind of got this nice blue colour by here, and he's got bubbles as well. So again, everything is tied nicely together. You absolutely understand what this video is about just through looking through the thumbnail. But people like nice looking thumbnails, and it's very hard to kind of define what good looks like, because very much beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But there are a few things that you can do to make your thumbnails more eye-catching, and one of those ways is to pull the user's eyes towards what you want them to look at. Now, in our case, what I did earlier of brightening up Mario a little bit and why I chose these particular colours is for two reasons. One is, they need to stand out against their background. Now, Mario, obviously, he wears blue trousers, so that is going to blend in a little bit, but He's got a bright red hat, he's got bright white gloves, and he's got a bright palish face, which, when Mario was originally designed for Donkey Kong in the arcade, they only had so many colours to work from, but the one colour that they couldn't make Super Mario was complete 100% black, because that was what the colour of the background was. They also couldn't make him the colour, they couldn't make his shoes or like the whole of his body the colour of the red girders, because then that would blend in. So, and what they needed to convey was the fact that Mario was a little human guy. But they could also use the opportunity to tell a little bit of a story with him, which is, well, he's a carpenter, so he wears overalls, so he wears a hat and stuff like that, and, you know, let's give him a little so, and, you know, there's the story of how Miyamoto designed Mario, which was, they gave him a mustache to give him more facial features, so you could see his nose and his eyes and stuff like that, and the point of the overalls as well was that when his arms moved back and forth, you could see them appear over his leggings, so that stuff didn't, you know, so it didn't look like a blurry mess. And, you know, they couldn't use outlines at the time because of how they designed the arcade game. They needed certain elements to be certain sizes, and Mario could only be so small, so adding outlines and stuff to him wouldn't really work. That's why he has remained such a cool and iconic character, is that, you know, you can scale him as big and as small as you want, but he's still recognizable. Which, again, that is the nice thing with this thumbnail, is that he is nice and recognizable here. But like I said, the blue of his trousers does blend into the blue of the background, but that doesn't mind too much, because the red stands out, and that's the important thing with Mario. And that is why we also use the red for the text, because why water levels, that is the key phrase here, that is what we are talking about. But we could also do a little bit more with this, because the one thing that we want to sell is the fact that they suck. So we could make that text a little bit bigger. And one thing that I always like to do when I am working with text is, when I scale it up, I would like it to be to the edges of the text that's slightly above it. So if we scale it up like so, as I am doing this, what I am doing is I have selected the number and I am using my mouse wheel to roll up and down. If you do it normally like this, it's only going to do it in like increments of 1. If you hold the shift key, it does it in increments of 10. So you can use this to kind of get it right, and then you can use the big one to kind of get it, you know, forward, upwards, and down like that. Also, another thing that I forgot to do with this text, but I will show you guys this now, always change it from metric to optical. What this means is that metric is... So what that actually does is it changes the... Wow, thanks for the shift key tip. And that shift key thing works on everything. So like brush size and anything with numbers. And the thing is that that works across all Adobe programs as well. Shift is for if you want it to do it by maxims of 10 rather than increments of 1. So that is a really useful thing to know. So this changes the kerning, and what kerning is, it's the space between letters. Now when fonts or typefaces are created, the creators do it with a particular, you know, size in mind between all the letters, but there are instances where you'll want to change it. So if you're in the print industry and you're doing everything price per line, and you want to get slightly more text on a line, you'll want to shrink the space between letters. But then on the flip side, if you want to make something easier to read, you increase the space between the letters. And Photoshop and Illustrator and stuff gives you the option to do it yourself. Like if you use metrics, you can go through and change these by, you know, 50, 75, 100. But I don't know when... The space between spaces, like Indiana Jones, that's honestly how I remember it at uni, and I'm a journalist. Yeah, no, exactly. This would be something that you would have picked up in journalism, and like, I only know this from purely, like, I learned this from doing an InDesign crash course like a year ago. Like, that, the guy taught me what the difference between tracking and kerning is, and he basically said kerning's between letters and tracking's between words or something like that. And leading is between the line above and the line beneath. So, yeah. I used to hate InDesign until I got a crash course in it, and now I genuinely really like it. My favourite thing with InDesign is when you create a text box, and then you scale it in and around, and the text just automatically updates for you. It is so nice. I think it's very cool that I'm actually doing what all the dials and stuff actually mean, rather than just me dragging them around and hoping for the best. Yeah, that's the one thing that I always think is, like, in Photoshop tutorials and stuff like that, it's always nice to kind of have something to build and go along with, because a lot of how I learnt stuff in Photoshop was through wanting to make stuff and wanting to go for do a particular style of pastiche or something. Like, oh, I want to make this look like a retro comic book or like a VHS cover or something like that, and so I'll go online and I'll see, how to get this effect and stuff like that. And usually they'll kind of tell you what the dials and buttons and stuff do, but not always. So I always think it's worth knowing what that stuff does. But I also think it's worth knowing, for a tutorial, it's nice to kind of build something to kind of show what this stuff goes into, rather than... Because I remember when I was in secondary school, and I was like one of the first people when I was about... God, this would have been year 7, so I must have been like 10 or 11 or 12. Like, I was one of the first people in my art class who was using Photoshop, and so my teacher was like, oh, well, we got a computer, could you teach the kids how to use it? The thumbnail king look. Oh my god, is that is that Hamish Black writing on games? Oh my god, he's in the chat. Crepes. Damn it. Hello, thank you for coming along. Yeah, I had to teach people how to use Photoshop, and I didn't know how to do it, so I literally went through all the different options and said, use save to save, use import to import, adjustments, levels, and I just did it like bit by bit like that. But then the guy who came after me, like, he was just like, okay, what do you want to use Photoshop to do? And somebody put their hands up and they were like, oh, well, Sin City's come out, so how do I make something look like a Sin City poster? Or, oh, how do I make my photos look better because this one's blurry and this one's like the colours are ordered? And he literally just went through and told them, like, how to do that stuff. And it's like, that's like the best way to teach people how to use Photoshop, is just go through, teach them, like, give them something to work from, and just like go from there. Wow, I've totally lost my train of thought, unfortunately. So to get back to the one I was talking about, yeah, so with this, I always like to make the bottom text, or like this big bit, I always like to have the text kind of match up edge to edge if I am making it a different size. Most people will say don't change the sizes of stuff because you want to keep it consistent. I don't agree with that. Break the rules to make a point is what I always think with thumbnail stuff. So, and what I will actually do as well is, because I've got 50 spacing across all of this, I'm going to make this slightly bigger because it's going to make it even more readable when we scale it out like that. See, exactly. So water levels, that's the key component. Suck, that's another key. Why? That's the key. But suck, that's what people are looking at. Exactly. You want suck to stand out as much as possible. And people always say, well, it shouldn't matter because you have the text, underneath and all that sort of stuff. Whatever, The thumbnail, people are always going to look at the thumbnail first. Thumbnail first, then the name of the video, then who made it. Or sometimes it's thumbnail, then the person who made it, and then the title. But it's always usually thumbnail first, because that is where your eyes are going. And yeah, look at that. Mario, he's really angry because he's looking at that. In fact, what I'm going to do with these bubbles is I'm going to make these slightly transparent. So if we go to... And we can do this in two different ways. There's opacity and fill. I always do this by fill, and I will give an example why in a second, but let's just take this down to... Yeah, let's take this down to half for now. Some of them are getting a little bit disappeared, so let's not double it, but let's take it up to, like, yeah, let's kind of meet it halfway. So let's say 75%. Yeah, that's a lot nicer now. Very good. So we're getting there. But what's another way that we can kind of get people to look where we want them to? Well, there is an old-fashioned thing in photography. absolutely with you on prioritizing keeping the edges neat rather than having every word needing to be the same size. Yeah, exactly. It just looks nice. Like, it looks nice. Like, that's the, you know, I don't, it's just like such a way to improve it. It just makes it look nicer. But there is an old-fashioned thing of photography called vignetting, and what that is was it was a leftover artifact of when you would take a photo and light would be coming into a lens, the edges of the lens would lose some of that light detail, so you would get a little bit of black edging around stuff. But what a vignette does is that your eyes are more likely to be pulled to the middle of the image. You're not going to be looking around the edges. And this is one thing to consider with a thumbnail, is that you pretty much want everything important to be in the middle as much as possible. And there's a couple of reasons for this. Human eyes are naturally drawn to the middle of stuff anyways. There is a term for this called the rule of threes, which Photoshop kind of has when you do cropping, but it pulls up this little rule of threes thing by here, and what that basically means is that where these lines intersect by here, your eyes are more likely to be drawn to where these intersections are, which, well, what do we have? The intersections? Mario, text. Bammo, important stuff. But there's another thing to this as well. You may notice that I haven't put anything by here or anything by here. And the reason for that is, if you go onto YouTube, let's say I was watching Best of the Worst earlier, because I just need something to waste my time. Let's see if I can find a video that isn't one of theirs. Okay, I can't. But, okay, so Sean's a good example. Let's hover over Sean for a second. We have save for later. We got save for later, add to playlist, the time code, and then a big play button in the middle. The play button doesn't matter too much because it's slightly opaque. Those things will cover anything on the right hand side, so do not put any important information over by there. It will be covered by YouTube, so don't bother. So basically anything over at this particular area by here, no man's land. Do not put anything by here. That is the golden rule of making YouTube thumbnails, is don't put anything in these bits by here. If you can get away with it, essentially. Which you should be able to. The thumbnail, like Seth John says, you're the Scarlet Pimpernel of your thumbnails. So, you know, this is all stuff within your hands. And because of the way that we build all this stuff, you can move Mario around, and you can move the text around, and all that sort of stuff, so it shouldn't really matter. But the important thing with the layout is try and get everything in the middle and don't put anything on that side. And one way that we can maximize making people look in the middle is through using a vignette. And how do we make a vignette? A couple of different ways, but here's how I do it. Grab the gradient tool, put it on that, and then slightly drag from the bottom. Here's another tip as well. If you just do this normally with your mouse, oh, how do I keep this straight? Hold the shift key and it will snap to north, east, south and west. Like so. And now what we can do is, oh, should I redraw that? No. Hit Control and T and it'll give us a little transformation thing, and we can make this slightly bigger or slightly smaller and all that sort of stuff. Bingo bango, like that. Then we can draw a new one from the top. Or what we can do is, if we like this one and we just want to use it as a piece of reference, let's duplicate it. Control J, Control T. When you go to a corner and you get this little curly arrow by here, rotate it. Hold Shift so it does it in increments of 15 degrees, like so. Pull it up. Bammo, look at that. Now, if we pull it out, again.
Yeah, baby!
Oh, thank you very much for following, Hamish. So as you can see now, your eyes are less likely going to go to these dark edges. They're being pulled more where in the middle. That is what you want. And we don't just have to do it for the top and the bottom. We can also do this side to side as well. So let's make a new layer. Let's pull one a little bit over this side by here. Maybe knock the opacity down a little bit, just to so it doesn't affect the text too much. And on the other side, because it's mostly Mario and that's going to be covered by the YouTube gubbins, we make this a little bit bigger, like so. Now if we pull out, look at that, see? It makes the bright stuff stand out way more, which is like the most important thing with this. But there's another thing that we can do. Let's group all these up. So hold shift, select the one at the bottom, the one at the top, and let's group it. Control and G. So now we have all our vignettes in one folder. If you want to change the name of the folder, just double click on it and type whatever you want, essentially. So that's now on top, so that's affecting everything below it. But let's say we only want it to affect the background image rather than Mario and the text. That looks pretty cool, doesn't it? That's not bad, is it? But let's say we still want that one which was to the right of Mario to affect Mario. There we go, look at that. Not bad, not bad. And again, like, consider where we had the thumbnail only a couple of minutes ago, where we didn't have any vignetting and we didn't have any kind of color, like we hadn't changed with the text, or we haven't, didn't add any of these gradients and stuff like that. Again, it's just taking it that little extra step to help stuff pop out. And we can do a little bit more. We can maybe brighten up Mario and the text a little bit, and one way that we can do that is throwing a levels on top of this. So a levels curve is essentially, if you have ever used a digital camera, you will see this kind of like peaks and valleys graph, which essentially shows all the values from 0 to 255, because computers calculate light in 256 bits. Well, 256 values, which is, I believe, a bit. Yeah. 0 being complete black, absolutely no detail, and 255 being complete white. And so everything in between is your different grey values. But what you can do is that you can push this stuff up so the starting point of complete black happens earlier. So say like this, which is naturally going to darken the image. But we can also do that on the other side by having your bright area start a little bit nearer as well. And so like the text has naturally got brighter, and Mario's got a little bit brighter as well, but not quite bright enough. Perhaps we want to brighten Mario individually to the rest of it. Now we did originally put a levels on top of him, and yeah, we did fiddle around with that stuff. But then because we put this filter on top of him with a multiply, it's kind of darkened him. So maybe let's change that. Rather than making it a multiply, let's make it a color. So it's coloring him rather than darkening him. Not quite there though, is it? It almost makes him look like he's in cyberspace or something, and we still want a little bit of that color. So maybe we could go with a soft light or something like that. That's not bad. That kind of works. Or maybe we could combine a few things together. So let's use a soft light, and then let's use a color, and we'll make the color a little bit less intense. Yeah, see, that's not bad, is it? That's starting to come together now, isn't it? That's not looking bad. And again, let's maybe take the transparency down a little bit on this, just because I think now that the background is darker, those bubbles now stand out a little bit more. We could even make them bigger, because they're not quite readable at that small thumbnail size. So let's just make them a little bit larger and a bit more, stand out. Anything that disappeared off the edges, let's pull them in like that, and then let's kind of redistribute them in and around. And that's not bad, is it? That is not bad. We could leave it there. That is a nice... That kind of hits all your thumbnail hallmarks. Text, bammo in your face, nice big image that's going to pull you in. It's a person, it's a face, they're sort of facing towards you, but they're looking at the text. That's a nice little visual gimmick. We got nothing over here which is important, so we can have all our time codes and stuff like that. All the key elements are being nice and red. But if you were me and you wanted to take it a nice little extra layer, we can do, say, we can take it the step of try and marry everything together a little bit better. And one way that we can do that is by using, we could use a gradient map to try and match all the colors a little bit better. So if we go into, so that's the effects, that's the mask, what you called? Adjustment layer. So these are all your adjustment layers. So you can have a solid color, a gradient, a pattern, hue and saturation, stuff like that. We are going to go for a gradient map. Why would I use, so the thing with these adjustment layers is that if you go into an image and adjustment, these are all stuff that are in here as well. But what I was saying earlier about there's destructive editing, if we were just to say, like with Mario, image, adjustment, gradient map, and then, like, yeah, let's say we just keep this black and white one on him like that, and then, but then I decide, oh, but what if I want to change that, or what if I want to apply it to other stuff? I can't now, it's locked in. Like, I have to go back, undo, and then go through it. Don't bother. Use adjustment layers, because it means that you can fiddle around with all this stuff after the fact. Like, you can change the opacity of it, or, you know, you can change details of it. Like, say, we don't want to use blue into white. We want to, say, do, you know, and Photoshop gives you a couple of different options. The one that I quite like using is this blue, red, and yellow one, because it kind of, if you have it at a particular fill, it almost kind of makes everything have this kind of like action poster sort of look to it, where, you know, there was that kind of thing that people pointed out with action movies is blue and orange, where cold sci-fi blues into hot action oranges, which makes sense. The sun is a big ball of fire, so when things are illuminated, it's not pure white. It has a slight orange or yellow tint to it. And in inverse, in shadows, things are cold and naturally blue. So if you ramp these things up, it's like supernatural as a result. Like, you know, your blues are super blue and your hots are super hot. Like, and then having a bit of red in the middle, you know, it kind of, it's that kind of nice transitionary point between blue to purple to red to yellow, essentially. So, well, orange and yellow. And so with this, we kind of almost have this kind of like burnt sun-kissed look to it, which is cool, but doesn't quite sell under the ocean. So what if we went with, say, what if we made our own? So if we think of colours that are under the ocean, say, we change this to hue again, like, what's kind of going to be your darkest colour? Like, you know, you're going to have, like, really cold. So why don't we push it more towards purple and maybe make it a little bit darker? And then with this, maybe we'll kind of push this towards cerulean, you know, kind of the cerulean colour, like that. And then rather than yellow, why don't we go for kind of more of a mint greenish sort of colour like that, and then make it a little bit brighter. And then suddenly it kind of looks like everything's kind of got a nice blue tint to it. If we put this at 100, that's what it looks like. And what you'll notice is that, like, yeah, his leg is blending in and his, you know, stuff like that. So maybe we want to darken the background a little bit more. And one way that we could do that is by exposure. So preset, we could use preset for this. We could just say -1 or -2 for this. And yeah, like, you can immediately see it as dark in the background enough that these things now stand out a little bit better. And then if we maybe slowly pull this gradient map back, ooh, but then you notice that the background is a little bit too dark. So maybe we want to maybe set this to 50 so it's not as intense, like that. And so looking at that, like, that's not bad. But maybe we still want it so that red stuff, like, pops out a lot better. So, you know, what's one way that we can do this? Well, every adjustment layer has a mask applied to it. So what we could do is, if we remove it and say, go to select, and basically your select menu is, so we've been using the marquee tool and stuff to select stuff. You don't have to do that. There's other ways to do it as well, which everything is under the select menu. And now let's go to color range. And what that lets you do is that it gives you a little eyedropper, and let's select this red colour and then play with this. It will let you select everything that has this particular red colour. Like so. Or at least it should. Why didn't it do that? Let's make a new layer. Maybe it's glitching. There we go. Now. Oh no, it already applied it. That's why. So yeah. So if you haven't selected and do that, then sometimes it does apply it. But it's applied it in the wrong way. It's masked out the stuff that we do want, and it's left everything else in. But we can double click on it, say invert. Now it's done the opposite. Look at that. It's not bad, is it? That is not bad. We may want to soften it up a little bit, but that's fine. We can play with the feathering, which basically feathering is... Oh, that looks really nice. Yeah. And I mean, we're about, what, an hour in, but we started like 20 minutes, we started 20 minutes after the recording started happening. It doesn't take very long to like throw this stuff together. And again, like we started from initially just being Mario against a blue background with text. But then we build on it and we push it and we push it and we push it until we get something nice like this. Is there anything else that we can do to this though? Is there anything more that we can do to push the thumbnail? I would say it would be good to kind of leave it at this point, because if you start to do too much of it, there's two problems for that. First one's economical. If you have a video that comes out in a day's time, but if you're spending 2 days making a thumbnail, then that's not economical at the end of the day. Second thing is, this will always be the smallest somebody will see a thumbnail. So if you're going to go in and draw like extra eyelashes on Mario and paint in his skin and stuff like that, people will not see it. And it's not that people won't appreciate it. You could always post that stuff on Twitter and people can say, oh, this is really cool how much detail you put into it. But Joe and Jane and their MB friends who will go on Twitter, who will go on YouTube and just look at this stuff and not know the context, won't see that detail. So there's no point doing that. But there are certain things that you can do that are always going to be red. Like with these bubbles, why not? Why don't we stick a little glow on them? That's the one thing that's been in my head since we've started working on this. Is let's grab that blue colour, make it more like that. Maybe not the opacity down a little bit. And that does stand out. It makes it look a little bit softer. But yeah, at this point I don't think there would be anything more that I would add. Maybe I would blend out Mario's leg a little bit by here. And that's just purely because when the YouTube timer appears over that, then it's not going to stand out as badly. So, yeah. That's our thumbnail right there. That is a nice done job right there. But one last thing that I always like to stick on a thumbnail, and this is for the folks at home here. This is a nice James D top tip. I always like to stick a nice little color lookup table on it. What is a color lookup table? This is stuff that they use in films for grading. And essentially it's a little bit of maths that says that is going to push values to particular colors or particular is going to push like particular values to particular values, essentially in particular colors. And it's what you would use if you want to very quickly style something. And we got a couple of different ones. We can make it say, we could add like a warming effect to it, like it's, you know, lit by candlelight. Or we could actually add a candlelight effect to it. We can add a 2-strip look to it, which looks like it's gone through old-fashioned newspaper printing. We could have it so, like, kind of old-fashioned photographs, like black and white ones. They wouldn't just be black and white. They would use different kind of inks and metals and stuff to give it particular tones. So, you know, you'd have green to red or like cobalt and carmine and stuff like that. And then there's the ones at the bottom, which these are a bit more like photo ones. So you could have an anime palette or a color negative, or the one which I always like using is red, blue, and yellow, and it essentially does the same as the little gradient map that we threw on earlier, but it's a little bit less noticeable. So let's just keep it a little bit subtle. I like to push stuff a little bit more towards red because it gets it nice and warm, like so. And that is our thumbnail by there. And so what I would usually do in this case is that the client, I would go back to them and I would say, here's the first draft, what do you think of this? And they may come back and they'll say, yeah, they'll either love it or they'll say something like, this is good, but could you move Mario? Or, I don't know if I want to use this text. Like, maybe I want to make like more of a declarative statement. But that's fine, because none of this is... Because we could be stupid and just like flatten this all down, but you're never going to do... You would never ever do that. You want to keep stuff nice and edible after the fact. So one way that we can do that is if we just duplicate this text layer, again, select it, Control J, hide the one underneath, and say, rather than say why water levels suck, let's just have it water levels suck, like that. Again, maybe it might not sell as good as the last one, or... And then maybe we want to say, well, you know, we'll have that stuff in white and then the stuff in red at the bottom. But because of the way the text has changed, we want to move Mario now. So let's group all this Mario stuff together. Let's make a duplicate like that. Let's shrink him down a little bit. Boom, like so. And that's what we got now. Maybe we want to move the bubbles as well as a result, because, you know, now they're clipping over different bits of text. So again, make a duplicate of that. We'll look for that particular bubble. Probably this one. Yep. And we can send that back now to the client with a variation. And what did that take? Like a minute to do? Yeah. It's very, like, it doesn't take a lot to get like good results out of this. And if you do a non-destructive workflow, you can get like results. You know, you can just make changes on the fly really quickly. And again, like, even if you make your own thumbnails and you're not working for a client, it's still worth running your past stuff different people and be like, hey, you know, does this look good or whatever. You know, somebody might be as extreme to say, you know, I would actually want to see a Mario water level in the background, not just, you know, random water effects. So maybe we'd go back on Google and we'd say, okay, well, let's have a look. What kind of Mario water levels have we got? And, you know, we got Hazy Maze Cave, we got this one. Yeah, let's Jolly Rush Bay. Yeah, so with this one it's a little bit like, because the angle of it wouldn't quite work, but let's say, let's use this one. It's the best water level in Super Mario 64, I'm not going to argue that. It's the worst, it's probably one of the worst levels full stop in Mario 64, but it's the best water level, unfortunately. So the one tricky thing that you always kind of bump into on Google is that like a lot of images that people upload is stuff that they've drawn themselves or painted themselves. You just need to be good at like being able to catch that stuff out so you don't accidentally, you know, steal other people's work. Because even at thumbnail sites, if somebody recognizes, you know, brushwork and colours, they will call you out on it. But if there is a particular image that you find like really evocative or works very well, a lot of the times you can just contact the artist and say, hey, can I use this in a thumbnail? I had that example with, I was making a thumbnail for somebody who was making a Mass Effect retrospective video, and I found on Reddit that somebody was recreating the Citadel in Blender, and they had done these really lovely renders of like, you know, you see all the backgrounds and like all the fins spread out and stuff like that. And so I just sent him a message and said, hey, like, am I kosher to use this? The video won't be making, like, I can put you in contact with a video maker, they can talk about, like, if they're going to monetize or anything like that, but they basically said, no, that's absolutely fine, because you're not using it for anything, like, you're not going to make money off it, so, yeah, don't worry about it. So, in some cases, it does work out quite nicely, which, what you want. Yeah, no, exactly. If you work for, the company that I work for has that thing as well, is that, like, even if we recreate images off Google, like, we need to accredit, like, the artist that did it, because otherwise they will just take us to the cleaners. If you're a small YouTuber, though, a lot of the time they just won't touch you. And if that is the case, get that in an email and get that in writing, because if they ever change their minds, you can send that to them and say, well, why did you change your mind, bud? So, but game stuff is kind of an interesting thing anyways, because you're technically taking screenshots of other people's work, so, and technically it counts as advertising. Yeah, so it will very much vary. I mean, if you have the opportunity to do so, if you have, like, the creative juice to do so, you should, like, try, like, creating your own stuff, I always think. But so let's scale him up. Yeah, oh yeah, that's cool. Now the only problem is that he's gonna be covered by Mario, though, is the only thing. If we had a little bit of a ghost sign blur to him as well, just so he kind of perks up a little bit. See, this is quite nice, but the only issue is that if we scale in... Well, actually, no, you can still kind of make him out. That's not bad, is it? Yeah, alright, that works. That's not bad. Okay. And then, say, if we wanted to, you know, we didn't want this repeating texture or whatever because it's just going to, like, draw people's eyes, we could throw a mask on this and... Yeah. Again, like, one thing that I always say to people, if you know, if they want something in particular done, I always say, well, if you got the opportunity to grab your own thumbnails, do that. Like, oh, sorry, to grab your own videos or whatever, do that. Like, Eurothug and Jacob are quite good at that because they have the money to own top of the line PlayStations. I say, can you use the screen grab? Can you use the share function to send that stuff to me so I don't have to, like, try and grab it off Google? And yeah, a lot of the time they do. So. Oh yeah, look at that. That's not bad, is it? That is coming across very nicely. And then, like, one thing we could do as well is maybe have like, in a lot of these kind of underwater stuff. Yeah, I know. Lucky for some. So yeah, we got that stock image, which. So here's what I was thinking: these kind of, like, light rays that you get in the water. So if we use this. And then, because we only really want the rays, what we can do is, if we use levels, if we push this all the way over here, and then push the blacks all the way over here as well. And then if we just want it so that the kind of the light areas come down, we could use, like, say, light in, and then, you know, change the fill and stuff like that. That's okay. No, I don't mind being... like I said, if people have questions or they have interjections or whatever, that's absolutely fine by me. I like responding to people. And there we go. And again, like, that didn't take very long to do. Just to take those elements in, to pull them in and, like, you know, fiddle around with them and stuff like that. And that is not bad, is it? And again, if the guy says... Actually, I like the first one you did. Well, you just go into Photoshop and tick that off, Don't know what these dark bits are in the corner, so I'll have to figure out what those are. Tick that off, tick that back on. Tick that off, tick that back on. Tick that off, tick that back on. And look at that. Easy, easy peasy. And we've gone all the way back to the original version now. Just like that. And then, yeah, when you're ready to save, just, you know, give it a nice little name, you know, water levels suck or whatever like that, just so we know what it is. Maximize compatibility, yeah, absolutely. If you're going to be sending this to people with different versions of Photoshop, you want to make sure that's ticked. I should probably say don't show this again, but I'm lazy, so I'll just leave that as is. And that is that. But let's say that you're now happy with this thumbnail and you want to put it on YouTube. Well, what you do is, you go to File, you go to Save As. Save it as a JPEG. Photoshop, YouTube does not take pings and doesn't take GIFs. You can have a ping for yourself for a nice high quality version for Twitter. YouTube will not accept it. You gotta save it as a JPEG. Maximum quality though, if you can do it. Baseline optimized, that's all just stuff that's baked in. Preview it, that just basically means if you put it all the way down to small file size, you see all this junk artifacting. Put it up to maximum, looks absolutely fine. It'll look fine enough for YouTube. And then you say okay, and that is you done. Look at that. In an hour, we have gone from having no thumbnail to what I consider is a very nice looking thumbnail. That is something that people would look at, they would click on it, and they would watch that video about why water levels suck. There is one more thing, though, that we can do, because when I was coming up with these... Yeah, see, that's what I mean. That is all stuff that you guys can do. Like, if you have Photoshop, if you have CS6 or anything later, you can absolutely do all of this stuff. If you've been using Photopea, which I linked, you can do all of this stuff. But I think a lot of it is also down to not just the tools that you're using, but it's just about having the right method, right? Just being kind of in the right mind for kind of how to approach this stuff. And so, like I said, you know, make sure that your main stuff is right in the middle, because that is where people will be looking. If you put it over there, that is no man's land. That is where your time code is, and that is where the buttons is. You might have a triangle over there, but it will be translucent enough that you will be able to see this stuff. So maybe don't have stuff right smack bang in the middle, but have it in the middle. If you want to push people's eyes in a particular direction, bright areas for where you want them to look, dark areas for where you don't want them to look. If you can find a way to compose these things nicely together, either by overlaying bubbles and stuff like that, or by, you know, matching the colours, do that stuff as well. And then you can always do little things that will get it to a nice level of professionalism, which, you know, consider vignetting, consider colour lookup tables and gradient maps and stuff like that. But if you are a particular YouTuber and you have a brand, you may want to apply that stuff into your thumbnail as well. Which, because I anticipated that I would be making it for these YouTubers, I went to the effort in Adobe Illustrator and made some of their icons. So if I open a recent one, question is, where did I save it? I genuinely can't remember. Hopefully it's in thumbnails, I don't know. And okay, it's not there. Okay, is it in streaming? Yes, it is. So the game mechanics have a logo, and their logo is this. So if we isolate this, let's get rid of the text, let's just have it so it's just the icon. Like so. Let's pull this into Photoshop. Smart object. If you're importing stuff into Photoshop, do it as smart objects. And the reason to do that is basically means that after the fact, because it's a vector smart object, you can continue to scale it as big as you want or as small as you want, and it will not lose any quality, versus a raster image, which is what that Mario is. If I scale him up, he is going to become very pixelated. There are ways that we can fix that, but if you have the opportunity to use vector artwork or a really big image, turn it into a smart object every single time. So here's their logo, but the question is, well, where do we put it? Because oh, and also we might want to change the color, because that kind of black color doesn't really stand out. And the thing about their logo is that they change the color of it depending on what they talk about. What is one colour that we aren't really using here? Yellow. Now, we do have yellow for his buttons, but we could use a nice bright yellow colour on this, which is going to stand out against the background. So, oh, whoops. Oh wow, why is that so massive? There we go. So that is definitely going to stand out against the background, but now it's a question of, well, where do we put it? Because if we put it down in the corner by here, it's going to be covered by the time code. We could potentially put it by here, where Game Maker's Toolkit, he usually puts his little logo, and that's where I put my GamesD logo, because that, it doesn't matter too much if that gets covered by Watch Later, because that's something that only really appears when you hover over it. And again, like, it doesn't matter so much that the Game Mechanics logo isn't seen in this, because they will also see it on the next to the video itself. But we could put it over in this corner by here, where we know that's not going to be covered by anything. So if we scale this down a little bit, like so. But the only, of course, the problem with their logo is, actually, no, that's not too bad. I was going to say, when you scale it in, yeah, you don't quite make out that that's a little joystick, but you still make out the spanner. And if it's a very recognisable logo, then obviously that stuff's not going to matter too much. But another thing that we could do is, like, we could put it on a little banner or something, or we could put a drop shadow behind it. We'll put a little drop shadow behind it, see if that makes a difference. And yeah, it does. It actually, you can actually see the edges between the joystick now, which is a nice little detail. So, yeah. So if somebody has a particular brand or a particular like template that they want you to work, or like a logo that they want you to work in, it's not very hard to do that. If we were working from the start with that in mind, then perhaps we could probably get that stuff a bit more baked in, but I think that works out pretty nicely. So, yeah, there we go. Has anybody got any questions before we move on to the next thumbnail? It's probably going to be a bit more of the same, but because it will be a different person and a different need, hopefully we should be able to go into different things. I'll have a quick drink. Now I'm going to pour myself some water. If we're all happy, I am happy to move on. So let's save Mario and let's start a new thumbnail. And again, like before, 1280 by 720. Resolution, pixels per inch and 72. That is just monitor, like old-fashioned monitor resolution. If you're working in print, you might want to change this to like 300 or like 150 or something like that. You don't really want to fiddle with this stuff too much, is what I always find. Sometimes it will set the color mode to CMYK or like RGB or whatever. If you're importing stuff from Illustrator, it may sometimes change it to CMYK. This doesn't matter too much when you're actually making it, but when it comes to saving, that's going to be important, because basically CMYK isn't a format that computers work in. It works in light space RGB, which is red, green, blue, and as they combine together it comes bright white. CMYK is for printing, as in when you combine all those things together you get pure black, because obviously that is light. RGB is additive because it's light, while CMYK is reductive because it pushes stuff towards black. But you're going to want to change this back to RGB just so you don't worry about that stuff. Also, if you bring in video footage and stuff like that, occasionally it will change it to one of these. Change it to square pixels, because otherwise you're going to have a headache working in anything. And then for profile, just leave that. You'd never really have to worry about that sort of stuff. If you were going to, like in the film industry or whatever, you may need to fiddle around with that stuff, but you're making thumbnails for YouTube, so just leave it as it is. And you can name it if you want, but you can also do that when you save it, so nothing to worry about. Right, so who was the other person that wanted a thumbnail done? Let's have a look. Okay, so the other person that we had is a channel called Left D-Pad, and they do videos that combine game evaluation and leftist theory. What's the video about? Papers, Please and propaganda games, as in the video game Papers, Please. And what's the thesis? Papers, Please is an unflattering look at what life was like in Russia during the Cold War. This video is a rebuttal of that and other games supposedly set in this time period by US devs. Okay. So, they've already mentioned a game that will be front and center, so let's start looking for stuff to do with Papers, Please. And already, like, I kind of, like, thinking of the idea, I kind of go, oh, I sort of know what we could do with this, as in, maybe rather than having it be something from the game, we could do a nice little bit of word art for this, because Papers, Please obviously has this cool logo where it's like, you know, Papers, Please sounds like a fun game to make thumbnails for. Yeah, like in this, like, I wouldn't really want to do it like, I feel like there's a lot you could do. Yeah. So what we could do is, like, you know, try and extend one of these pictures or whatever, or something. What I'm kind of having the idea is, why don't we create something that evokes the art style of it, and in particular looks like this cool logo that we have. So one question is, why don't we do some word art? So, what font do they use for the Papers, Please logo? Let's find out. Papers, Please logo font. Well, turns out there's already a wiki for this. Let's find out what they use. So they use something called Agitprop, which is as the basis for the game title in the main menu. So let's open it up. Yeah, there we go. That is the Papers, Please logo. So let's download that. Show in folder, like so. Extract to its own folder, like so, and then let's install that font. Fonts. There we go. There it is. Now, the only problem with making installing fonts while you have Photoshop open is that it won't automatically appear. I think it does in newer versions of Photoshop, but it doesn't in CS6. So I will quickly close this. Nope. And I will reopen Photoshop. Give it a couple of secs. There we go. Right, let's make our canvas again. To it, B720, like so. Oh, forgot to change it to RGB, but that's fine because we can do it here. We'll change the mode from CMYK to RGB color. Right. Now let's check if the font's installed. Let's just type hello. And let's see if it installed. It was called Agitprop. And there it is. Yeah, look at that. So one way that we can test if it actually does look like the logo is if we actually import the logo. I can't remember what tab. Ah, there it is. So yeah, so the way that they've done this is, like, they've kind of added this wide perspective effect on it, and also has a comma. So oh, interesting. Okay, so this font doesn't actually have a comma by default, so we might need to create that. That's okay. But the text at the bottom is a little bit bigger, so let's reflect that. Obviously, it's a little bit harder to work from something which has already had perspective applied to it, but that's fine because we're just doing this for a quick test. So let's go with 50 spacing between the text because I think that is what it is. And then let's make this really big. Yep. Yeah, let's use the sides to kind of like try and match it up, like so. Try and get the spacing correct as well. Now, Control and T. That's right, because in text you can't apply too many effects, but if we change this into a smart object, like so we can still edit it after the fact. Control and T, scale it up a little bit. Perspective. And what perspective does is that it applies a perspective transformation to stuff. And look at that, we almost got this in one. Not quite. So if we go into editing on this, if we just double click it quickly, let's make the canvas a little bit bigger as well, just so we have a bit more to work with. Double click the text, like so. And let's make this a little bit bigger, like that. Let's go for 210. Let's say okay, let's save this. Nearly, almost. So once again, go back in, scale it up, move this down so it doesn't clip, save again. And there we go, that ain't bad, is it? That's not bad at all. Let's fiddle around with the spacing again. There we go. Not 100%, but we have a starting point to work from. So, if we... yeah, let's place. Okay, so let's say we start with this red color as a background. And let's just change the transparency on this because we don't want to see it completely, but we just kind of want it as reference. Like, let's make a copy of it and put it in the corner, like so. And let's kind of do the same with that because we're not going to use that text, but we are going to bring this back if we can. Yep, we can. So Papers, Please and Propaganda Games. We could, if this font has an ampersand. Oh, it does. Oh, that's nice. Okay. Yeah, let's stay with "and" for now. So that text is 122. Let's make it 120. Oh, we're going to have to make that all 120. There we go. And then the text on the bottom is 270. Let's make this 230. Let's actually make this 180, actually. Bring this up. Let's make this 270. Oh, let's actually make this 230. And we can almost kind of have it like it repeats how the font looks on the top. And then, yeah, let's make the bottom 270 and then space it out a little bit. Hide the text on the bottom like so. It does look a little bit like a Carry On movie set in Soviet Russia, set in 1960s Soviet Russia. Yeah. I will say though, the bright colours would get people's eyes on it though. And then let's make that white. That. And then, as we did before, but we'll make a copy of this just so we have an original to refer to. Convert it into a smart object. And then using that as a reference. That's perspective. Fiddle with this. So not quite to the extreme of the original logo, but I think if we made it too extreme, it's not going to be that legible on YouTube. See, like, that's not too bad. Papers does blend a bit too much together, though, is the only thing. Like, that, this font is... it kind of appreciates from being a little bit bigger. So one thing that we could do is potentially have papers and please on one line, and then, like, maybe separate it out. It's tricky. Let's try that, though. So let's make another duplicate. Add space. Let's say 180. And then we're going to have to fiddle around with the spacing by here. And then, actually, you know, I might make the spacing between the text a little bit more, the leading between the text a little bit more extreme. And if we change this into a smart object again, perspective, scale it up a little bit. And there we go, that's a little bit more readable than the original. Yeah, that's way more readable. Yeah. But you might notice with the Papers, Please logo, it does have that kind of like deep shadow beneath it. So one way that we might be able to recreate that is if we stick a drop shadow on this, set this to 90 so it's going completely straight down, set size to 0. Basically size isn't like the size of the shadow, it's kind of the size of the feather on the shadow. So if you put it all the way up, it's a nice big soft shadow. You put it's a nice big sharp. We kind of want this as sharp as possible, essentially. Rather than a multiply, because multiply, it will just darken the image underneath it, which is how a shadow works. We just want this to be a absolute color, which I believe is kind of like this, but we can grab it from the image itself in a moment. Oh, that's pretty close. And then if we extend this, like so. So yeah, so the issue with this is that the way that kind of drop shadows work is that it just essentially duplicates it, and then, you know, this is a very kind of like old school way of doing it. It doesn't quite do it to the effect that we want it. So what we may do instead is a bit of a cheat for doing long shadows. So let's take the drop shadow off. Let's take the drop shadow off. Let's duplicate this. Let's rasterize it to make it editable again. Select this color. Create a clipping mask. Apply a color on top of it like so. Put this underneath it, and then move it down by 1. Duplicate it. Move it down by 1. Duplicate it. Move it down by 1. Duplicate it. Move it down by 1. So on and so forth. You may be able to combine these together, and then there we go. Not the most clean solution for doing that, but it does get the result that you want of doing these kind of nice, sharp, long shadows, which is how the logo of this game looks. Granted, they also have a little bit of perspective put on them, so I'm actually wondering whether it was originally made so that the long shadows were applied to them and then it was perspective warped out of the fact. Maybe the text even might have been created in 3D and then done like that after the fact. But again, you might not have access to 3D software to be able to do that. You might not be able to want to spend the time doing that in Photoshop. Again, you're kind of aiming to be economical with this. You don't want to spend too long making thumbnails, and plus, if you scale out, you get the same effect as the Papers, Please logo, even if it isn't exactly like the Papers, Please logo. But let's pair all this stuff together anyways. Let's center it like so. We could just leave it there, but that is a bit of a... That is not quite right, is it? It still needs something. So what we could do is... Let's have a look at Papers, Please again, and the country in Papers, Please has this cool logo. So why don't we use that? Papers, Please logo. So a lot of people have made transparent. There we go. That's what we want. And there we go. And look at that. That is a nice 1K size that we can use. Not a PNG though. Not a PNG, but that's okay. I can show you how to fix that. So let's save that to our thumbnails folder for now. And we can bring that in. Okay, never mind, it is a transparent PNG. I spoke too soon. But if for some reason you download something that isn't a transparent PNG, but it's against, say, I don't know, like a green background or something, you just go to your Magic Wand tool, you select all the green, and you say delete, like so. Easy as that. Let's bring you then into our Papers, Please logo. Now, we could put it at the top, like the Papers, Please logo, but what I'm actually thinking is that this might look quite nice behind it, like so. But of course, because it's all in red, the little eagle doesn't actually stand out. So what we'll do instead is we bring him back to the top layer, like so. And if we hide everything else for a second, just so he's on white. So he's made out of a couple of different elements. So he's got the shield in the middle and he's got these flanges to the side. Well, we could get rid of this shield in the middle and we could have it so it's like an opaque. So it's using the background color for the shield. And let's say instead, let's put the eagle and the flanges all in the same color. And let's say, let's put it in yellow for now. Let's bring everything back, put it on the red, and that's not bad. Let's bring the colour down a bit, just so it's not so intense. And there we go, that's not bad. We do have a bit of a text issue though. This thumbnail has quite a lot of text in it, and as a result, it's not super legible. So maybe we might go back to the client and we'll say, could you shrink the text down a little bit? And they'll say, well, because you can kind of tell that it is Papers, Please from the logo, from the artwork, how about instead we just have it say Propaganda Games? Great, let's do that then. Of course, it's not as easy as the Mario one because we've essentially created a little bit of art out of this, but we can use the same techniques that we did last time to create a new version of that. So let's duplicate the bit of text that we had before, remove this stuff just so it is Propaganda Games, maybe it could be the art of propaganda games, perhaps. Let's have a think with that. Let's make games a little bit bigger as well. Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, that works. Let's maybe make the spacing a little bit bigger because we're going to be adding this drop shadow to it early on. 220. Okay, now let's duplicate this, put it in that green color from before. Like so. Put that underneath. Like this. Move this down, like so. Make a duplicate. There we go, that's not bad, that's not bad. Maybe make another one as well, just because... Oh, actually what we could do is, rather than doing that, we could just, anywhere there's a little edge case like this E by here, we could just make a shape. We could just do a little fill. And there we go. Not as clean as if we made the text ourselves in a 3D program, but it didn't require us opening a bit of 3D software to do that. So let's pair everything up again. Let's turn this group into a smart object and let's add perspective to this. Oh, thank you very much for hosting the stream, Matt. Let's scale this out a little bit, scale it down a little bit, and scale it this way. Look at that. That's not bad. See, now that is a lot more readable than what we had before, which was... I can't even remember what we had before. Did we delete it? I hope not. Oh, yeah, it was this. See, again, so this was what we had previously, not totally legible. Now we have this, way more legible. In fact, we can scale it up even bigger, so we have it even way more legible. It's great. And again, perhaps the client might come back and might say, can you use an actual bit of artwork from the game or something like that? And we can do. We can go and... papers, please. Screen shots. But again, it's funny because a lot of these things are so kind of... even though it was a pixel art game, a lot of this stuff wouldn't be legible in a YouTube thumbnail, so we might need to pick and choose the stuff that we're using. So say... let's use this image for now, though, as an example. Copy image, file, new. It should, yep, it will know the things that we're using. So let's say instead we just use this lady by here, who's against a height board. Edit, copy, merged. Now, as we scale this up, what we have been doing previously, we've had it set to bicubic automatic, which basically just means that as it scales it up, it will apply a little bit of maths to kind of smooth the edges a little bit and try and keep sharpness where it thinks it's hard edges and stuff like that. If you want to keep it completely hard edge, which is a really useful thing when you're scaling pixel art or sprite art, change it to nearest neighbor. And what that basically means is that pixels will scale, but they will not blend together to try and smooth things out. It will be as sharp as hard pixels. Like so. Unfortunately, this screenshot did have a little bit of noise in it because it probably was using JPEG compression. So this would be a reason why, say, we may want to go into the game itself and actually grab our own screenshots, maybe using pings or whatever, so we don't have this level of compression. But if we put this, say, down by here, maybe we could move the text down a little bit, like so. And then maybe to add kind of like a cool little effect to this, because if it's about propaganda and about, like, you know, cutting people out and stuff like that, maybe we could stick like a little bar over our eyes or something like that. That'd be neat. And now that's a different variation on that. And because of how we've built this, obviously we can switch back and forth between them to see kind of which ones we prefer. One thing that we can do is to maybe fix the issue that we have with this, where the pixel art is kind of a little bit JPEG blocky looking. If we go to adjustments and go to posterize, that limits essentially your color palette, which if you want to kind of evoke a particular look, like it's only using so many different colors, this is one way that you could do it. So let's set it to 16 for now. Actually, no, let's not do it that way. Let's use an adjustment layer, because there is a posterize adjustment layer. Turn it on and off. Okay, so that now fixes the problem a little bit. Not quite to the extent that we want it to, but it is a nice quick fix to fixing this. And yeah, like, so now with this, well, the background's a little bit busier than the last one, so maybe what we might decide to do is add a slight drop shadow behind this, because even though it has got these hard shadows, a little drop shadow, just, you know, expanded all the way up so it's really soft, just darkens the background around the text and helps it pop, essentially. Helps it stand out a little bit more. It's the opposite of the Mario thumbnail, where we kind of wanted to blend elements together. In this case, we need the text to stand up just so it is easier to read. And that's not a bad way of doing it. And again, what we could do is that we may decide to kind of combine elements together of, I like the color scheme of this one, but I like the image of this one. Could we change this image so it matches that color scheme? And we absolutely can, using gradient maps. So if we go in here and we maybe start with this, let's go with like a nice dark purple, and then have red as our main, and yellow here, like so. Yeah, but the only thing is, it makes it look a little bit like a heat map, is the only thing. But what we can do is maybe move this a bit more towards red. Yeah, there we go. We can affect the opacity of that, so that rather than it being 100%, we could just have it be like just like a slight color wash on top of it. We can change the blending mode to color if we wanted to, so it's not as like harsh. We can make it like a multiply layer so it darkens it, or a screen layer so it brightens it. That's not bad actually. That doesn't look too bad at all. Oh yeah, no, that's nice actually. And again, like, because all this stuff is non-destructive, we can fiddle around with it and just essentially get some that we like looking at. So if we shrink this now, and then we may decide again, like, oh, let's... well, actually, what we might decide is, if we duplicate that rectangle that we made earlier, hide the other one, and then change it so we're using the new... that colour that we used before to make the bar across our eyes. And then, like we did with the Mario one, we could throw a little bit of a gradient behind just to kind of draw your eyes a little bit. One way that you can do this as well, which is what I usually do, is if we go to exposure, and this works the same way as camera exposure, which is, you know, lighter and darker your offset for it and your gamma correction and all that kind of stuff. I usually just use the preset to start with, so let's say -2. And then if we double click on the mask, use a gradient and use a radial gradient, and let's use a nose right in the middle as the starting point. Again, hold shift just so it actually it doesn't matter because it's radial, so but you can use shift if you want, just make it a little bit easier. And let's say we go to around here, make it a little bit bigger, use it with, use it without, and again it's now pulling your eyes in. But maybe you want to make it a little bit darker, so we can push the exposure all the way down like so. -4. Maybe we could gamma correct it like that. Let's just make it a bit more intense. Basically, the world's your oyster, really. You can do whatever your heart desires. And again, now we have a different variation of that. Here's it with the logo, which for that shading stuff might be a bit intense, so we might fiddle around with. Maybe we'll make a duplicate version of that and make it a little bit less intense, like so. And then maybe we'll actually pair it in the group that it's associated with. And then with that, that's another variation doing it. And again, we've just kind of gone through and we've made a couple of different variations on the same idea. It's exactly as Video Games Are Bad said earlier, there are a couple of different directions that we can do this. And by applying a non-destructive workflow, we can flip backwards and forwards and left and right as we want to try and push these things to a particular look that we want. And in the old James D way, we can stick a colour lookup on it, nice red, blue and yellow, so just to kind of style it to a particular way. And that is our two potential thumbnails for Papers, Please. And that took less time probably than the Mario one. This one probably took a little bit more in regarding what did we particularly want, what kind of style were we going for, but it's again pretty cool, isn't it? Like, it doesn't take long to put this stuff together. I mean, again, I've just kind of looked at that and I thought, well, it sort of looks a bit like a flag, so here's one thing we can do. If we just make a quick version of it, yeah, like so. Flag texture. Let's go with this one. Well, it's Adobe stock, so maybe not. Let's go with this one. Yeah, there we go. Let's paste this on top, scale it up, filter. Okay, so here's something you can do, which is the opposite of nearest neighbor, which is, and also we should probably change this back to bicubic automatic, like so. But let's say you have kind of a bit of these kind of ugly artifacting and stuff in images that you've brought in. What you can do is go to filter, go to blur, and go to surface blur. Ghost sign blur's not quite what you want for this one. You want to use surface blur, which is a little bit clever because it's going to look for edges and stuff and not really apply blurs to that. And so if you fiddle around, so radius is like how much of it is affected, and threshold is like how much should I try and keep to the original. So if you have it at 2 levels, it doesn't do much, and then as you push it up and push it up and push it up, it's going to affect more and more. And then if you have radius at 1, it's not going to do anything, and then it's going to affect more and more and more and more and more and stuff like that. So this might do the trick, actually. If we scale out, yeah, that's going to do absolutely fine. And so one way that we can blend this is by doing multiply. And now it's applied the flag texture to the flag underneath. But as you're probably well aware, well, this flag has creases and stuff in it. So, like, why is the unless they designed the flag in such a way that it would work in these creases, that's not quite correct, is it? So if we make a quick variation of this, Control and T, right click, go to warp. We could get a bit more scientific about this and more detail, but if we just kind of follow the creases and how they work, we can just sort of pull them in like so, and there we go. We will have to fill in those edges a little bit, but that's not bad, is it? That is not a bad little take on the original thumbnail. Let's combine these two together just to show what I mean. Let's show the original underneath. And that's even nice and readable on a thumbnail size. So again, and that's like, you know, looking at the image that you had previously and deciding, oh, actually I can make this look like a flag. How do I approach that? Which, yeah, you could go with the effort of like drawing a flag or whatever, but you can find a flag online, you can find a flag texture, apply it on top, and then make sure that like the creases, I mean, in some cases, like you could get like a flag texture from like a 3D program or whatever, and then use that as displacement data in Photoshop, and it will apply that as well. In fact, I think I might be able to do that with the black and white one that we got, but I won't for this, just because it's a bit too complex. But like I said, it doesn't take very long to put all this stuff together, and as long as you're doing it non-destructively as you're going along and you're kind of using different, you know, a couple of different tools at your disposal to get the look that you want, it is really easy to just get results. And again, this follows exactly the same rules as the Mario one did, which is the text is exactly where we need it in the middle. It's not going to get covered by the time code. The A might get covered a little bit by the thing by here, but you're still going to be able to make out that it is the word propaganda. And again, it's the one thing that I always say in the thumbnail streams, which is text should always be legible, which either means make your text as big as possible or use less text. So you can, yeah, use less text as big as possible or use a nice readable font or something like that. We wanted to evoke the fact that this was Papers, Please. So we've used the logo from Papers, Please. We've recreated the logo text art from Papers, Please, but we've been able to do it with our own key phrase here, and it looks like, you know, if we put the logo on top, it does look like it could be from the game Papers, Please, which is great, you know. And it's the one thing I always say, which is, if you got the opportunity, if you have a brand with your channel, but if you have the opportunity to break from format to kind of make it style to look like the game or something like that, then you're on for a winner, really. Like, because people will look at it and will go, oh wow, is this about Papers, Please? And then they'll look at the title of the video and they'll go, oh wow, it is about Papers, Please, this is great. And then they'll watch the video, and that's what you want. So, yeah. This has been 2 hours. We've made 2 thumbnails, which is pretty good. Otherwise, if you are working for somebody and you are working, you know, and you were working out a price for somebody, you know, an hour of your time, if you consider like British minimum wage is like, what, £8-9 per hour if you work in a shop or whatever, you know, you could charge a tenner for this, but because you are using your particular skill set, you can, you know, ask for more money for stuff like this. So this is a really decent money maker. If this was something that you wanted to go into outside of making thumbnails for your own videos. I mean, this was something that Rasputin mentioned in his stream the other night, which was, if you're going into YouTube, consider it as a career. You know, think again, because, you know, the amount of sleepless nights that you're going to have and trying to chase trends or trying to like nail your niche or stuff like that, it is a lot to consider. But the more lucrative edge of YouTube is by, yeah, hashtag hustle. The more lucrative edges in YouTube is by, if you have a particular skill set that you are good at, like if you are very good at video editing or doing audio editing, or you're very good at like creating motion graphics or doing voiceover or making very nice looking thumbnails, you can provide a service to people. You know, it's collaboration at the end of the day. You know, some people are very good writers, some people are very good at voiceover and video editing, and some people are very good at branding. And if you can bring all those elements together to make the best video possible, why not? So, yeah. There are a couple more thumbnail requests, but I think for now, we're 2 hours in. It's been quite a comfortable Saturday night. And I think maybe not a bad place to wrap up for this week. I think I might try and do another one of these next Saturday and go through the different thumbnail requests, fake thumbnail requests that we had. But to the people who were still in the chat, how useful did you find this Photoshop exercise? I don't know how many of you returned from... I know video games are really bad. Harry, you were here for the previous thumbnail workshops. How did you find this versus those, which I did go through Photoshop a little bit in them and kind of gave, you know, like layout tips and stuff like that, but that was kind of more around the, you know, helping people out with work that was already created, while this was work, you know, like I said on Twitter, this is concept to, you know, it's from initial concept all the way through to final creation. I feel like I learned a good bit. I just made a quick thumbnail for my next video. Fantastic. Yeah, if you got knowledge and skills out of this that you wouldn't have had before, then, you know, that was why I ran this stream. My work is done, essentially, because, yeah, like, at the end of the day, like, I'm more than happy to make work for people and stuff like that, but, you know, the one thing that I've always wanted to do is, you know, I'm a big evangelist for Photoshop, despite the fact that I'm not Adobe certified because I don't want to pay $1,000 to go on a course for a certificate. But I think it's a great piece of software. But again, a lot of these skills can be applied to different programs like Photopea or GIMP and stuff like that. So it's more kind of a matter of if you have these skills to... And again, it's not so much that people don't have the skills to do so, but it's just like... sorry, I just got a message, so I'm just going to double check what it is. Oh, that's a cool thumbnail. Very nice. It was very useful, thanks. Well, thank you very much, Watcher123C. A photangelist, if you will. Yeah, I should put that in my Twitter bio. That's a good one. What was I going to say? And a lot of this stuff is not like, you know, I'm a genius because I figured all this out. At the end of the day, this came from 10, 15 years of... well, probably even more than that, because I started using this program when I was like 9 or 10, and I'm going to be turning 30 at the end of the month. So yeah, I've probably been using this for near 20 years at this point. Bloody heck. Yeah, so like... And a lot of this stuff just has come from the fact that this is a program I really love, and I use it like nearly every single day, not just for thumbnails and stuff. Like, I'll use it for digital painting or like photo manipulation and stuff like that. Like, a lot of skills that I picked up for creating thumbnails was through learning to draw and learning to do photo editing and stuff like that. You know, graphic design and layout design and like what looks good. Like, you know, having stuff that looks good at a small scale, that's just came from like sprite art and like getting really into that when I was a little kid. And like good title art and font art came from like doing stuff for my own videos, and color theory and kind of spatial awareness and stuff, that's purely through trying to draw comic books and stuff like that. So just a lot of these different experiments all kind of drilled down into how I know these sort of things in Photoshop. But I'd like to think in these past 2 hours and 20 minutes I've been able to get across what has taken me 20 years to kind of, you know, get to. And, you know, I'm not an expert at making thumbnails. I mean, you guys were suggesting stuff which was all like, you know, cool stuff. You know, there are people out there like Zolsi who can like draw his own thumbnails, which are great, or like people who can use, you know, who have their own kind of camera equipment or stuff so they can do like really professional photography for their thumbnails. So if you you know, if you got a little quirky, like if you can draw or if you can do stuff like that, absolutely do it, because that's like another avenue for making thumbs. But keep in mind, like, you know, will it be readable, like sidebar size? Are people going to be looking at where they should be looking? Can it incorporate text and stuff like that? So yeah, I think with that though, this has been quite a good little stream. But unless you guys have any requests, I am happy to wrap up things here for tonight. And yeah, obviously the VOD I'll download from Twitch, and I will be putting it on. Oh, that's the thing, actually. Let me tell you guys about that, because the last time I ran a stream, I did not have this, but I now have a channel for backups of the previous streams. So if you weren't able to make it along to the previous 3 that were ran, no problem, just go straight there and you can watch the previous 3 streams, which are split up across multiple videos that I ran, which should give you a nice little basis of if you kind of already have more thumbnail skills, kind of going the extra edge of like how do I clean this up, layout and stuff like that. This was kind of more of an onboarding to how do I make thumbnails, and then these were more for how do I make my thumbnails better, essentially. But I did quite enjoy running this Photoshop stream, so I will probably, as I said, I will probably do this again next Saturday. Hopefully Twitch... Thanks for the stream. Well, thank you very much for being here, Evan. Hopefully, if Twitter is behaving itself next week, we may get a better, may get a better stream going. But no, I'm very glad for you guys for turning up and being part of the stream. So it's I will leave you all now to get on with the rest of your Saturday nights, wherever you are. Saturday afternoons, I guess, if you're over in the US. Sunday mornings, if you're over in the Oceanic region, and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, this was a lot of fun. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Matt. You too. And with that, I will leave things there. So thank you very much, everybody, for coming, and goodbye for now.